We've got Renée Walker here, who is a spiritual teacher, a mentor, your podcast host, and someone who I have really learned to appreciate so immensely over the last few months. I had the pleasure of being on your podcast, Spiritually Wired, and to have you a part of the magazine and on this podcast today is a real pleasure of mine. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, we were just saying what a blessing it is to connect with women who, we're just aligned in so many different ways. And it feels like such an honor to be here. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is spirituality. And I feel like there's a lot of nuance around spirituality now with people finding their own way, but I'm curious how you define spirituality.
Okay, so spirituality, I love that you're asking that question because I do feel that it is a deeply personal question that, that answer will be different for every person. But the basis, the foundation of spirituality from my perspective is that there is a belief that there is a higher energy that exists, whether you call it consciousness, you call it source, spirit, God, even, doesn't really matter the name that you associate with it, but it is a belief in a higher energy that's at play. And then the spiritual part of it from a personal perspective then is your spirituality is your connection with this higher energy. And that changes, it evolves over the years. I think it's one of the greatest things is when we can learn to define what it means for ourselves. And because for many of us, and I do feel that sometimes there's that misconception that religion and spirituality are the same. It's probably the first thing that people will say to me. Yeah. And it's hard because I know that there can be a lot of difficult emotions connected with religion, depending on what your story is. But I do, religion is there. It can certainly serve and help to deepen your spiritual connection. But the two are really completely different depending on what your relationship with it is. So it's, that's where I would say spirituality is.
Yeah. And what is it to you? So because I have so much to say around that. How do you define it for yourself?
Spirituality. Yeah, it is my connection to this higher energy, this consciousness that's at play. And it is a decision to consciously be co-creating with this higher energy. And I do believe that my spiritual journey, the way that it's played out in my own life is it felt like it was an awakening. Prior to it, it was more of, you're living life more in a reactive mode, which I do believe so many people are living because we're waking up now. Chances are you've got your phone very close, and then we start giving away our energy. So like right from the beginning of the day. And now you're living life in a reactive place. And so your spiritual connection is really a conscious decision to be in this co-creation with this higher energy. And it is a decision. Yes. It does require showing up for it.
Oh, I love that you just said that because I feel like that's the tipping point into really developing your faith, your spirituality is actually treating it like a living, breathing relationship and putting in time and consideration and reading and studying and listening and observing. And I think a lot of people get a taste, but that taste doesn't necessarily build into this really fulfilling relationship unless you give it that time.
Absolutely. And I mean, just the word relationship says it all. I mean, it doesn't matter what relationship it is that you have in your life, whether it's in your family or, friendships or your spiritual relationship, it does require time and presence.
Yes, it does. And it's interesting you say the religion versus spirituality because I was definitely brought up in a religion in church. And I'm so grateful for that because it really did lay a lot of foundational pieces for me that
Yeah.
I'm just so, so grateful for. But I did find the more I built my relationship, the more I disassociated to a lot of the practices or teachings of some of the religious churches that I visited. Not that they were wrong, because what I realize is there's a lot of people in the room being very fulfilled through their experience of that religion and church. And so, how dare I interrupt that? Just for me, kind of playing off of what you said, it developed into something where I had time and space and connection to something that outlived church walls.
Oh, what a beautiful. Yes, and that is the key thing, is that it gets to be what it needs to be for us, and that can evolve over time.
Right.
And yes, some people find they deepen their spiritual connection through religion, and that's beautiful when that's your experience. So this is the place where we get to allow for people to define that relationship for themselves.
Yeah. How do you help people do that?
Well, the first thing is space. Just as we were speaking about earlier, there is just the world today, the pace of life that we are all a part of, the influx of data and information. And so the place where we find that connection is in stillness. It's in the space. It's in the quiet moments where we can actually just allow ourselves to be. And as simple as that sounds, it's not easy today.
No.
Because again, like we start our days where, energy. So we can think of spiritual connection as also being energy. So an energy is always flowing. So it's either going out or it's coming in, right? There's this flow of energy that's happening. And so if we're starting our days giving away our energy, we're losing ourselves, our own connection in the process. And so that where we start is actually being intentional with creating some space in our lives, in our day, where we can actually be quiet and still with ourselves. And in that process is where we can start to actually pay attention to, I'll use the word intuition, but your intuition is really the voice of your higher self. It's that God aspect of you that lives within you, whether we use that word God or universe or source or spirit. But yes, it lives, it really is in the space and the quiet.
So space and quiet to listen. That was actually, I read a book by Mother Teresa years and years and years ago. And the one thing that she taught me in that book and I took with me was that prayer or space and time or meditation wasn't just speaking to God or source. It was actually the ability to speak, but then also pause and listen.
Yes.
And I remember being like, of course, because if I'm in relationship, I call it God. If I'm in relationship with God, it's not just speaking to God. What kind of relationship is that? Oh, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? It was like a laundry list of I need help. What if instead it was a conversation? And my soul and opened up to that idea, and that really dramatically changed what I would do in my space and time. It was not just speaking out for my desire or my asks. It was also being in tune with direction and, like you say, intuition of here's something I want you to see, or try this, or this is for you. And it really did dramatically deepen my relationship.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Yeah, I remember reading somewhere where it's prayer is speaking to God and meditation is listening to God.
Nice.
But again, it's this relationship, this communication that we forget.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. Most of us know what we need to do or what serves us more.
Right.
But then life happens, and that's okay. That's great. We have this day. We get to be humans and to experience life, and it's not meant to be this perfect space where you're just doing everything as you should. So that's okay. But at the same time, yeah, it's just being willing to actually slow down and to listen and to pay attention and to be in conversation with this higher energy. The thing is it's not easy.
No.
You know, as a meditation teacher I know, and actually years ago I used to teach yoga and Shavasana, which is like my favorite part, right at the end of the yoga class where you actually get to integrate everything. It's very difficult for a lot of people. And so the quiet, as much as we say, oh, I want calm, I want peace, there is, when you're not used to it, it can be quite uncomfortable.
Yep.
And oftentimes what happens is that there is a part of us that maybe fears what we'll hear in that quiet.
Right.
And so it's easier to maybe just stay distracted and numb yourself and do all the things. And listen, I've been guilty of all of it. I'm not ever one to sit and say I've got it all figured out. We are all figuring it out together. However, there is something for sure where if you've been not wanting to see something or not wanting to really hear what you know is wanting to be expressed, whatever it may be, it makes sense that it would be difficult to be in quiet.
Yeah. And I remember my pastor once standing up and saying he's never had that experience. So in his quiet, he's never experienced intuition or God speaking to him. And so he said, you know, it would frustrate me and somehow I would feel like I'm disconnected. He's like, it's just not my experience. I experience it through music or art. And so that was also very eye-opening to me because I think sometimes when we are practicing meditation, and this has been a lot of times my experience, is we're like hopeful for something, some sort of outcome where we're almost forcing a conversation or forcing an outcome, where you can tap into spirit everywhere. I mean, looking at you, you are a living being created by God. And it's like the coolest thing for me because it's just all of us meeting one another, but it's so available. And maybe someone needs to hear that today too. If that's not the way, what is your way? It's like finding that avenue, that place that you can feel connected.
Absolutely. The quiet doesn't have to look like a sitting meditation.
Right.
That's for sure. Meditation is just a tool that helps you to access that still and quiet. But it's not the only way. And for many people, it is actually moving your body helps you to be more in the quiet, in the space. So it can be a walk in nature. It can be, but the important thing is that you're just disconnecting from all of the external output, the external demands on your energy. So I always say it's the practice of turning down all of the external noise and turning up the volume on your inner knowing, on your connection to this higher self, to this higher energy at play. But it gets to look like what it needs to for you. And that changes. I get my biggest downloads when I'm working out, to be honest, because I'm out of my head. Right. So, and sometimes that can also be like, okay, just let me work out.
I don't want to stop and write things down.
Exactly. But it's just not being in that loop of thoughts that we all get caught up in, right? Very easily.
Yeah, it sounds to me like intention. You know, you're being intentional about space with yourself and connection. I love that. And I feel too that maybe some people listening in are, as they kind of feel maybe the call to lean into spirituality and what that could mean for them, there's this sudden point of resistance, a guard, and probably for good reasons. There's lots of stories out there of people who have had poor experiences, whether it be in their church or judgment by someone, or even what we're witnessing in the online space right now, people using God's name and doing the polar opposite of what's being taught, what polar opposite of love. And so it's not attractive in many ways. And so I understand why people would want to resist and retreat. How would you help them lean into exploring this for themselves when all they see is maybe negative or their experience at least has been negative?
I think the first place to start is to really look at it as if you're deepening your relationship with yourself first. And that can be independent of, the spiritual piece will often come with it, right? It's in an allowing yourself to be with simply yourself. And in the process, something may open, something may shift. You said something earlier, though, which I think is very important when it comes to this as well, is people will often, where we get stuck is in our attachment to specific outcomes, to what it's supposed to look like. One of the greatest spiritual laws is actually detachment. So it's learning that non-attachment. So allowing yourself to be with what is, just simply because you're in the moment, you're in that place of being. And so often when we feel maybe activated by certain words, by certain people, that's okay, because that's also discernment is very important to practice. And especially today, now, where again, we have so much information. And so discernment is important. Pay attention to how you're feeling. And it's not to say that you and I both know sometimes the activation is good, right? It's a sign that there's something there that is worth exploring. But at the same time, allow it to be your own relationship, right? It's not about what everyone else is doing. If everyone else is doing something that doesn't feel right for you, you have free will. You get to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And it reminds me of that permission. So like you said, those activations of, you know what, this doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah.
And so not cutting off and severing ties with your own connection. It's instead saying, what is this for me? If it's not that, how can I not only build this within my life, but be an example of how I feel this gets to walk around in the world?
Yeah. No, it really, it's one of those lifelong experiences that we're on. And that's the piece where sometimes we get, it's kind of become trendy too, as well. The whole, and it's an industry. So let's be real. It's an industry as well.
Yeah.
And so, you do what serves you in the moment, and it builds and it changes and it evolves. And that's the beauty of it. That's what it's supposed to be.
You just said something that I think is really, it would be an interesting conversation to have around how spirituality is now an industry. And I actually have never heard somebody say that, but as you say, that is the truth. And I've been really in my own discernment and journey around God and spirituality used in business, and how I am so celebratory of women who are showing spirituality and building spirituality in others. But I've also seen where it's been used and abused a little bit for marketing. And like, God told me to do this event, so I'm doing this event, as like, you can tell the sincerity isn't necessarily that it was God sent. It's more of God did this. So it's a lure into something. And I really work diligently in my life to not judge others, because we're all on our journey doing the best we can with what we know in that moment. But how do you feel being a spiritual leader? How do you feel around the industry and what you're seeing?
I, like you, am just staying in my own, like the way I feel when I'm in integrity and I'm in alignment.
Integrity, yeah.
And I'm recognizing, I see it, I do get activated. You and I had a conversation around using the word trigger.
Yes.
so
I'm
very intentional with saying the word activated. But it does get to me sometimes, because I do feel that it is, what I feel sometimes is lacking is the respect for it.
Yes.
That is what really gets to me. And that being said, who am I to decide whether this is true or not?
That's it.
So it really is leaning into my own knowing what feels right for me within, what the work that I do and the community that I'm building. And I know that space is in integrity. The big red flag is when someone in the spiritual space is showing up with all the answers for people. To me, that is a sign that you are coming to it from a place of ego.
Right.
So this work is really about getting out of our own way. And so even as a spiritual teacher and leader, I recognize that our connection, our spiritual connection, is meant to evolve, right? Our purpose is to expand. That's why we have the desires, all the things that are showing up. It's for us to expand. It's not about what we want to create in our lives. It's actually the becoming process, the healing that has to take place, right? That is what it's all about. And that changes all the time. So I will always say, this is what feels true to me now, because I'm open to the possibility that could change. Anyone who believes that this is it, this is how it works, this is what happens when you transition into the other, that's where I really feel the restriction.
Yeah.
Because the reality is we don't know. That's what faith is.
Yes.
Is not knowing and yet still believing and still trusting. So yes, I think it's important for people to absolutely practice discernment in this space, to tune into what feels good for them. Also being aware that sometimes those activations are a sign that there's something here that is inviting you to heal.
Right.
But yeah, it's this is it's the first time we actually talk about this whole spiritual.
Well, and it's great for you because your answer showcases what you said, integrity. I feel like that's really the first lens is this integrous? Am I looking at this person and feeling the sincerity? And you can feel that because, like you said, energy is moving. We can feel people's energy even if it's through a screen. And you are such a great example. I feel the way you just expressed and articulated that with compassion, with openness, with room to grow and evolve yourself without saying, I have the answers, but instead, I'd love to show what I've learned and guide you to your own answers. That to me turns me on to spirituality. Where I get turned off from the industry is like what you said, when we're using it as a form of ego and leverage. And to me, it's not something to use and abuse. This is our greatest relationship in our life, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
It is, for me, been there through my biggest celebrations, and it has been absolutely the place I land when I have hit those bottoms. That's another thing I actually wanted to ask you is you have women and men. Do you work with men too?
I do in my private coaching.
Okay.
The community is women.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you have men and women coming towards you, there's obviously a sense of curiosity. I'm sure they come with their own stories and things that have, maybe pulled them out of, and actually maybe I don't even need to assume that. Are they coming with spirituality, or are they coming with, I want to actually learn to be spiritual?
Oh, interesting. It's a mix always. Because some people, there's definitely obviously an openness and a curiosity, or they would not be there. But often it's this sense of, I know there's something more, but I just don't know what that is and what it's meant to be for me. So it's this sense of yes, like so there's a yearning. I mean, I'll refer to it often as a calling. This calling that is present. You can't explain it. You don't necessarily know what it is, what it's about, what you're meant to do with it. Right. For many of us, it maybe happens later in life. When I say later, it doesn't have to be late. Right. But, for me, actually, it started in my late 20s, right? When I was asked for the first time, I was invited to a coaching group. I was a young mom. I had no idea what it was all about, but I could get a sitter, and I'm like, sign me up, I'm in.
Yes.
Let's do it. And I remember showing up and this coach asking me, what do you want? And at maybe 28 with two or around like that age, and my kids were like very little. One was just a baby, and I thought, actually, I have no idea, and no one's ever asked me that question.
Wow. Yeah.
And because I spent most of my life, not that I was unhappy,
Right.
I actually had a good life, but there was something there that sparked, and then it became a search for this like, what is this more? What is this that I can't define, I can't express in words, yet it feels like it's such a deep part of who I am.
That feels good. I got God bumps up my arms when you were saying that, because it is a personal experience, like you said, and it is a feeling. And it's really difficult sometimes. I imagine, I mean, I'm projecting, but I imagine it's not always easy to teach that, because someone has to feel that experience to really understand it. The only thing I can kind of allude to in what I do is, I say to people often who I'm working with building businesses, is like, when you really believe it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And they're like, but I believe. And I'm like, no, it's the belief that's so in here that nothing will stand in your way. No timetable is a part of the equation. You are doing this, and you are committed to this, and you're unshakable. And I said that, but that's a feeling, and they want to believe that they believe, but you can tell there's still that little level of doubt. There's still that little bit of wobbliness and confidence. And then when it clicks, when they have that feeling, they become unstoppable. And I'm imagining that's almost what you see through the people that you mentor.
Yes, because we are in our head,
Right.
right? So we believe in our head. It makes sense logically. Of course, it's going to happen. Of course, I have everything that I need to do it. Right. But it's a felt experience, right? Your spiritual connection is a felt experience. And again, it doesn't have to be, to be clear, on a meditation chair and quiet. It's that moment of awe that you experience when you're out in nature, when you have a moment of pure presence. And, I remember reading this book, The Untethered Soul, which was just one of the classic books. And so simple, but you are not your thoughts. Most of us are living in our thoughts, believing our thoughts to be true. We're actually the space in between our thoughts. And so in order to connect to that space in between our thoughts, that's where we need some space in our lives to actually recognize that space and where it lives. I love that you brought up the belief too, because, and this is a thing where it's a work in progress, and we all have certain areas where maybe the belief is easier in here, and maybe here is where the belief is a bit more challenging. For some people, relationships are a struggle. It's just it's harder in that area, but money is easy. Right? That level of belief is there. And I know that for me, my word this year is believe.
I wrote that down. Yes, I saw that.
And the reason why was because I had this moment, this experience where it was something in relation to my business. And I said, oh yes, I know this is going to happen. And I said it, and I felt it in every part of me. And I remember pausing, because it wasn't necessarily the words that I said. It was the fact that I'm like, oh, this is what belief feels like. And do I have that same level of belief everywhere else in my life? Do I carry that level of belief? And the answer is no. I'm like, no, there are some cracks here. There are some areas and some parts, or I hold a big vision. And so, yes, I can see that some of the belief here needs to be worked on, right?
Yeah.
So that it's always evolving. It's always changing. And you are someone, I just want to say, Jen, like I meet so many different people, and I love meeting I mean, we have such a beautiful community. I love meeting people. There was just something when I met you of just, yes, you embody this, what it means to still have a big vision and still work towards. So it's not about taking away the doing, but to do the doing from a place of being. That is not easy. Not easy. I don't know why I'm getting emotional.
I got emotional too. Well, for us to see one another and for us to be sitting here and having this conversation in the first place, what a privilege, what a gift, what a blessing. Really. How many women today are sitting down and talking spirituality and belief and the ways we can stretch our imagination or experiences. And to me, this is, I feel, what we're feeling of like, what a privilege this is to be with one another.
It really is. I feel so honored. And it's a gift when we can shift into this place of getting out of our heads and getting out of like just the busyness. I mean, busy, I'm sure you hear that all the time. I'm so busy. And that's one of the things that I try to coach people out of saying, because busy is a state of mind. Yes, you can have a lot of things on your plate, 100%. But then that can also become who you are. It's just going from place to place. And so to have this moment, which is beautiful, but to actually be in it and allow ourselves to appreciate it, that is something. And it does require decision and intention to show up that way. Otherwise, we could easily be like, okay, well, we'll just do the thing, and then you're moving on to the next thing. So it is a practice. It's an art of really being in the moment.
Yeah. Presence was one of my words, speaking of words of the year. And I did see that you had believe. And I'm glad you shared that, because that was a really beautiful lesson for people just to look at all those pillars and areas of their lives. And where are those cracks in belief and how can you start to mend them? But I remember years ago, I had the word presence. And presence came to me because I didn't feel I had mastered the art form of presence. I found my brain was kind of scattered. Talk about, the word busy and being on the hamster wheel of life. And I remember having an experience of a woman, and she had just gotten off the stage. She was a keynote. And I, like many people, walked up to her because I just wanted to share how she had moved me. And she had this huge crowd of women around her, all fighting for the attention, the eye contact, because they wanted to be next to ask her a question. And I'll never forget her looking at me, taking time. I didn't feel rushed. And I felt like I was the only person in the room. It was such a profound experience, because I don't know if I could have been that steady. I think I would have been looking and trying to make sure everybody, okay, I'll get to you. But with her, I was the only person, and it moved me so much that I thought, I want to have that. I want to be that. And so when you talk about presence, and I feel like that's been an underlying sort of tone and message in everything you're saying, is space and time, intention, presence, removing ourselves from busyness, distraction, and coming back home to ourselves.
Yes.
Even that, I imagine, would spark somebody's spiritual journey. Just the art of pause and stillness, like you're teaching. And do you find when people start to feel this experience, does it take long for it to deepen? Do people kind of, just kind of wade into the water, kind of go in the shallow end and get to the deep end? Or do you find once people get a taste, they cannonball in the deep end of spirituality?
I would say it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on why they're there, really, and if they're ready.
Right.
Because one of the other key words is willingness. There has to be a willingness to do things differently.
True.
And we are so programmed to do things a certain way. So it does take time. It's not just okay, all of a sudden in order to really make it a part of your life, you want to immerse yourself in it. It's a decision that you are making to live your life intentionally, consciously. And yes, we're all going to have moments. So it's not about perfection ever. But when for those that are showing up actually ready, because there's something either that needs to shift or they're just, yes, I'm answering that call. Yeah. Like this is the time. Yeah. then absolutely it just shifts this way. But it's interesting because it can take time. I was just actually yesterday, one of my clients, who was just like a big, super, doer, lived in her masculine energy for years.
Yeah.
And then something happened in life, which is often the catalyst for most people. Something happens to just stop things and to where you ask yourself, okay, something needs to change. And then she did the flip into very feminine energy. And now it becomes okay, how do I bring it together?
Yes.
Because it's not about, and here's the thing that a lot of people also misunderstand is that, well, if I'm in the presence, first of all, either I don't have time for that or I'm not going to be productive. When it actually is the opposite. Right. The more present you are, the more energy you're actually bringing to what you're doing. And it's amazing what you can get done.
It is.
I mean, look at you. You're doing so many different things. I'm not sure you could do it from scattered energy.
I definitely couldn't.
No.
Definitely couldn't. No, and that's something I had to learn the hard way because time and space and rest and giving myself permission to unplug felt so counterintuitive to what I was doing and what I was building. And it felt like a waste of time. I thought there's too much to do. I need to be productive to scale and grow. And it had to be forced at the beginning. So anybody listening in, because I was very much in my masculine, functioned well, had great success. It just wasn't sustainable. And also I yearned for the feminine side. Yeah. So what I had to learn was, what do I find restful? I thought it was sit in front of the TV with Netflix, a bottle of wine, and a bag of chips. And it wasn't that for me. It ended up being solitude. I actually call it, I think I talked about this on your podcast, but I call it Sabbath. And so I have to have moments of Sabbath where I am by myself in solitude without distraction. And unfortunately, I have to actually leave my home and go to a hotel and really remove myself because I've got 4 kids, a husband, my dad lives next door, a dog, business. And so I find I don't really have that space. So I've had to create it. And just to speak to people listening in, sometimes we have to be that intentional. It's not like as simple as finding just a window. It's creating the space in your schedule. This is a non-negotiable block of time that I'm dedicating to find that side of me that I've been missing, to find that hunger for connection outside of myself.
Yeah, and as you were saying too, it was working before, but it wasn't sustainable. No. And I think that we do get to a point maybe in our lives where you realize, okay, I can keep doing this, but if I keep doing this, all I'm doing is depleting my energy. And again, if we go back to the energy, it's input versus output. If you are giving, I mean, at a certain point, energy needs to come back in, and it has to be intentional. The busier you are, the more intentional you need to be with your rest. Absolutely. And that's the part that, you were saying is counterintuitive. I'd love to ask you, I know it's your podcast, but I'm just curious because so many women will connect, and especially that you've got 4 kids, your businesses. What has been the impact from their perspective? Like what have they witnessed in you making that a priority?
Well, it's interesting because when I'm in my masculine, and there's busy seasons, and there's times actually we have to be in that busy season because business is growing and it requires attention. I can hear what their mom hears. Oh, you're always working, mom. And can you put your phone down? I hear those things. Yeah. But those are cues and clues for me. Okay, we're a little out of balance. I'm not in that presence that I desire. And it might be with good reason. And I have to explain to them, hey, here's what's going on. It's not forever. There's a window of time we're working on XYZ or whatever it may be. And their understanding supports. But then that clue tells me, okay, I've swung the pendulum too far one way. They're being affected. How do I bring it back? And so what they now say, it's interesting. The last little while we've said, when somebody asks you, what does mom do? Like, what do you respond? They're like, well, you're a stay-at-home mom. Really? Like it shocked me actually. My youngest son, he likes to brag. He's probably my biggest fan, but My other kids are like, you're home, mom. And part of me loves that, because what that tells me is that I am not sacrificing my presence, my time with my kids in order to grow. But that's come through stewardship, Renee. Like, I have built a schedule, and I am so strict with that schedule so that everything has its place and fits in, and I can give presence to everything.
Yes.
But it's never in balance. It's never in equal parts. But it's interesting now, really feeling like I've embodied the leadership I desire to have in my life and business, that the kids, because they're not seeing as much work, because I'm being very studious when they're not around, think I'm a stay-at-home mom.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Okay. But it's charming, actually. And I do feel it's also always evolving and growing. My schedule, what I think is going to work, then you have someone homesick, and it kind of makes it tip on its head. But I do think flexibility, fluidity, and also stewardship to our time is what has made this work.
Yeah. And I mean, I was asking that too, because I feel that we sometimes underestimate how much it actually we end up giving to the people around us without trying. It's not that you're doing it for them, but as a result, they have you show up in a more present, intentional, imperfect way. And I think like the imperfection is so important to always point out.
Yeah.
I know I was out with my daughter a few months ago, and she's in her early 20s, but she was saying how for her, because I was asking, I think she just mentioned it, but she was saying that the biggest thing is, she's like, you don't freak out as much as you used to freak out. I'm like, well, that is the best compliment.
It is.
Because here's the thing. We can't control, just like you said, someone's going to be sick. I felt like the more I tried to control my schedule, inevitably it meant someone was going to be sick. It's almost the law, something's going to happen. But we can't control any of the external environments. We can only control how we choose to respond to life. And so the more space we have, the more present we are, the more connected we are, because the other piece of the spiritual connection is that you realize that you don't have to do it all yourself.
Right.
Now you're in co-creative. You're in a co-creative energy relationship with this universe.
Yeah.
That is so magical and so incredible. It's not about wishing, I want a car and it comes. That's not the type of co-creation that I'm talking about or manifesting. But that invites so much more lightness when you get to surrender more, right? To trust, I'm going to take the action. I'm going to show up. I'm going to create as much space as I can. And universe, surprise and delight me.
That's it. That's it. I say surprise and delight often. And one of my flirts with God is, I'm like, God, show me how good this gets to be. So when I'm having a day maybe that it's not going my way, I'll try to flip it by saying, God, show me how good this gets to be today. And also when things are really working well, show me how good this gets to be, because I don't want to stand in the way of abundance. It's like, this feels big and beautiful and wonderful, but I'm sure it's a small little sliver of what's possible. Right. So it's like getting out of the way of what you say, co-creation and the experience that we get to have. I think that's so magical. Okay, so I know people listening in are leaning in. They're curious. They're wondering. And for those of you listening in, I want to be a huge encourager for them to reach out to you, because my assumption is that working with a spiritual mentor like yourself, and then simultaneously wanting to grow businesses or careers and families and relationships and health, and just to live a vibrant, beautiful life, it's such a great connection point to work with you. So where can they go to learn more? I know there's a Spiritually Wired podcast, so go download. Where else could they go to explore a little bit more with you?
So apart from the Spiritually Wired podcast, I have a Spiritually Wired membership. Ooh. So that's for people who want to go a little bit deeper. A big piece of your spiritual connection is also being in community. It's surrounding yourself in being in an environment, being with other people who are on that same path, that have that same energy, the same beliefs and desires. So that was, and as we were talking about earlier, a big piece to it is also remembering. We just forget. So the membership evolved very organically from a place of creating space for people. We start our Monday mornings together to meditate and to do some scripting and being intentional with how we want to show up. And then there's just a multitude of classes that are offered throughout the month, and a library. I mean, there's hundreds of recordings on everything from chakras to healing limiting beliefs to so many different topics. We kind of cover it all. So I'd say, yeah, my website is reneewalkerwellness.com. And then the Spiritually Wired membership is a great place to start.
That sounds juicy, delicious, and wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking such beauty and life into the world. Thank you for making such a beautiful impact. I imagine waking up every day, it makes me want to cry, and supporting people to be more connected to their spirituality is such a beautiful way of living your days. And I just applaud you for being that person for others.
Thank you. That means so much. And yeah, it really feels like a privilege, for sure.
You're a light beam, a God beam. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.